And folks, our next guest, well, he's a father of 2 daughters. He loves them dearly. He loves all children, as a matter of fact, and that is why he has taken a one-man gang stance against what I would call child abuse. And by that I mean the harmful philosophy of gender ideology, the medical disgrace that is puberty blockers. And this man is not shy to voice his opinions. He literally wears his opinions on his body. Before I give up that fellow's name, we're going to run a video, and it's going to tell you all about Billboard Chris Elston. Thank you very much.
So my name is Chris Elston. I'm known as Billboard Chris, and I'm traveling the country, literally hanging out on street corners and going to busy events, going to wherever the people are, just have conversations about gender ideology, mainly the medical harm that is coming to kids when they want to switch their sex. Because we have children who are being indoctrinated either in school or primarily on social media as well to believe that it is stereotypes that determine their sex or their gender. So overwhelmingly, it is supportive. At least I would say 9 out of 10 people support what I'm doing. People know instinctively this is wrong. We should be letting children grow up because it's not stereotypes that define who they are. If a child is gender non-conforming, we should just encourage that. That's fine. You don't need pharmaceutical drugs, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries to find your true inner self. But people understand this. People are supportive. It's just most of the supportive people are quiet. I'm just going to keep traveling the country, keep having these conversations, because I know eventually we win this battle. It's just a question of how much damage is done to children before that happens.
Oh, you're getting me emotional already. So my name's Chris. I've been on a unique mission for a little over 3 years to raise awareness about what I consider to be the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history. Our national treasure, David Menzies, just did a phenomenal job exposing the absurdity of all of this. But unfortunately, this goes beyond just the absurd, and it goes into tremendous child abuse. In North America, and back when this video was shot, I was just traveling Canada, but since the borders opened up, I've been traveling into the US, and I'm traveling across the world now as well. But in North America, more than 300,000 children have been diagnosed with this condition called gender dysphoria, which is essentially just self-loathing. These kids want to switch their sex. And it's primarily girls. It's girls when they're getting into middle school, getting into high school, where, shocker, it can be a tough time. Puberty's not always the most fun thing in the world. And these kids are being led to believe that the source of their discomfort is that they were born wrong. They were born in the wrong body. What does that even mean? Nobody can tell you. I've been out on the streets for more than 2,500 hours and at university campuses, having one conversation at a time to raise awareness about this scandal. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, not one person in this world can tell you what it means to be born in the wrong body, because there is no such thing. There is no such thing as a transgender child. They're called girls and boys. And the positive message we should be sending is that they're beautiful just as they are. No drugs or scalpels needed. But Canada, unfortunately, under our authoritarian dictator, Justin Trudeau, we are the epicenter for this trans insanity across the Western world. What does it mean to have a gender identity? Guess what? We don't have one. But our kids are being indoctrinated on social media and in schools to believe that they are. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this is the genderbread person. It's a gingerbread man, but you don't want to give it a gendered name, of course. And it defines your gender identity right on there as being based on your personality, your job, hobbies, likes, dislikes, roles in society, and expectations upon you. Tell me, what does your job have to do with your gender? I'm born in 75. When I grew up, we kind of got away from all these stereotypes and we taught our girls they can be whatever they want to be when they grow up. And they can be, they just can't be a man. But this is all stereotypical nonsense. Your hobbies? What the heck's that got to do with your gender? How many women here were tomboys growing up? Congratulations, you're all transgender. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from one of the greatest experts in the world. Boston Children's Hospital is the number one ranked pediatric hospital in the United States of America. Actually, they're number 2 now. And I'd like to think I had a part in that downgrade. But last year, in August of 2022, I tweeted out one of their own videos that their gender clinic had produced about how they perform gender-affirming hysterectomies at the Children's Hospital. And we'll get to that video in a second. But this video started to take off. It was getting a lot of views. Some media were picking it up. And I thought to myself, I'd better record this. It was from Boston Children's Hospital's own YouTube channel. I thought I'd better record this because they're probably going to delete it. Sure enough, that night they deleted it. So I tweeted out my recorded version. I sent it to Libs of TikTok, this popular account on Twitter. I sent it to Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, the guy who made the great film, What is a Woman? They retweeted it for me. And this video went viral because people, I think, knew that there were weird things going on in these gender clinics at these children's hospitals, but they didn't really understand exactly how ghoulish this was. But this first video here is from the director of the Gender Multi-Specialty Clinic, the top-ranked gender clinic in the world, probably. So let's hear from her what it means to be transgender.
A child will often know that they are transgender from the moment that they have any ability to express themselves, and parents will often tell us this. We have parents who tell us that their kids, they knew from the minute they were born practically, and actions like refusing to get a haircut or standing to urinate, trying to stand to urinate, refusing to stand to urinate, trying on siblings' clothing, playing with the quote opposite gender toys, things like that. There is more and more a group of adolescents that we are seeing that really are coming to the realization that they might be trans or gender diverse a little bit later on in their life. So what we're seeing from them is that they always sort of knew something was maybe off and didn't have the understanding to know that they might be trans or have a different gender identity than the one they had been assigned. So that is a growing population that we are seeing, and that's being recognized as being trans and able to be treated.
No big deal. If you're playing with the wrong toys, you can be treated for that. If you're a little girl that pees standing up because you got some big brothers and it looks fun, and I can attest it is fun. Well, gosh, maybe she's transgender. If a little boy has some big sisters, shocker, they're going to play dress up with their little baby brother. That doesn't make him a girl. Let's go to the next video, please. And I'm going to cut this one short because I can't stomach all of it, so I'll tell you when.
So most of the patients that we have in the GEMS clinic actually know their gender, usually around the age of puberty, but a good portion of children do know as early as seemingly from the womb, and they usually express their gender.
You gotta laugh at some of this stuff. Seemingly from the womb. Children know they're transgender. Are there transgender fetuses? I bet the Democrats wouldn't be okay with aborting them in the 9th month of pregnancy. This is totally insane. Let's go to the next video, please.
Gender-affirming hysterectomy is very similar to most hysterectomies that occur. A hysterectomy itself is the removal of the uterus, the cervix, which is the opening of the uterus, and the fallopian tubes, which are attached to the sides of the uterus. Some gender-affirming hysterectomies will also include the removal of the ovaries, but that's technically a separate procedure called a bilateral oophorectomy. And not every gender-affirming hysterectomy includes that, and people who are getting gender-affirming hysterectomies do not have to have their ovaries removed.
Well, isn't that a relief? This is a children's hospital, and it's not the only one. Tens of thousands of children, thousands and thousands of children in Canada are going to these gender clinics at your local children's hospital. There are waiting lists. The demand is so high. Just this week, you can look this up on your phones afterwards, the Children's Hospital of Winnipeg announced, and they're proud of this is their own press release on Twitter. There's a 10-year-old boy who wants to transition. Now, in their own write-up, they mention that he's concerned that he's not going to be able to have babies in the future. But that's okay, because he has dreams of being a world-famous actress when he's older, and he won't have time for babies anyway. This is a poor little 10-year-old boy with crazy parents who's been deceived to believe that he's really a girl. And crazy parents are going along with it. But where there's no excuse for any of this is when the health care officials go along with this. Not only do they go along with it, they push it. A bill passed in Canada last year. It's called Bill C-4. It passed unanimously. Now, I don't know if the member of parliament that was here earlier is still here. But Bill C-4 made it a crime for any of you to convince your child or your grandchild that they're a boy, if they're a boy, or if they're a girl. It's okay to convince your little girl that she's really a boy and turn her into a lifelong pharmaceutical patient. It's not okay if she's been indoctrinated at school or online. It's not okay to object to sterilizing your own child and to help her feel comfortable with her sex. That's now called conversion therapy, and you can go to jail for 5 years or get a $2 million fine. This passed unanimously. Formerly, this was Bill C-6. And when the election was called in 2021, all bills die, of course, so that bill never passed. It had already passed the House. It hadn't yet passed the Senate. At that time, I think it was 62 Conservatives voted against it, about 50 voted for it, and of course all the other parties voted for it. One of the Conservatives who voted for it was Pierre Poilievre. Pierre's got some work to do on this issue. A lot of people just have faith that when he gets elected, he's going to fix all these issues. Well, only one time, and it was just about a week ago, has he ever even mentioned the words gender ideology. He's been trying to walk this fine line on this issue, and it's not good enough, because thousands of kids are being harmed. We flew the flag at half-mast for about 9 months based off a hoax of Indigenous children who were murdered at residential schools and buried in mass graves. A total hoax. Indigenous kids today are getting sterilized and no one says a thing about it. In British Columbia, there's one psychologist named Wallace Wong. He gave a talk at the Vancouver Public Library a few years ago. He works for the BC Ministry of Children and Family Development. He said he's personally transitioning more than 1,000 children, including more than 500 in state care. There are only 6,000 kids in state care in BC. Almost 10% of them are being transitioned by one psychologist. Guess what? 52% of all children in state care in Canada are Indigenous. Today, this country, our children's hospitals are sterilizing and mutilating Indigenous children, but no one has the courage to say a thing about it. Shameful. So I need everyone with a connection to their MP to make some noise, because this isn't made up. We have receipts for all of this. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so pause it for 1 sec. So that man on the right there is Marcy Bowers. He says he's a woman. He is the president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. This is the organization that writes the standards of care that our children's hospitals claim to follow. They can follow. There's really no rules for any of this. It's the Wild West of medicine. But he's the president, and in the middle of that is Johanna Olsen Kennedy. She is the person who runs the gender clinic at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, the busiest one in North America. She received a grant a few years ago for $5.7 million where they could conduct research into giving the opposite sex's hormones to 8-year-olds, provided they were already entering puberty. The only kids really entering puberty at 8 would be girls, so they're giving testosterone to 8-year-old girls. These people are ghouls. This is evil. This is a cult that has permeated all of society. But here is Marcy Bowers talking about giving puberty blockers to boys at what is called Tanner Stage 2. So Tanner Stage 2 is the scientific term for the beginning of puberty. For girls, this is when their breasts first start to form. It's probably 2 years before they've had their first period. So they're going to be 9, 10. Boys are going to be a year or two later. Now listen to what he says. Let's go.
The second was an observation that I had, that every single child who was, or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner Stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about zero. These are of course, these are just assigned male at birth, so trans feminine, and it's because they never in their lives are exposed to testosterone. That doesn't change. That doesn't change. So blockers prevent the rise of testosterone, and they don't really go on testosterone at or around surgery or into adulthood. And so we don't know. They're going to have this sensation. There's no question about that. But are they going to be able to achieve sexual satisfaction? It's important in relationships, and I know that from my work with female genital mutilation survivors, that the lack of being able to be intimate with a partner is very important. And so this is what really raised the red flag for me, is to say, look, we need to have our eyes open about it. I think it's been beneficial talking about it. I know Joe and many others have reported to me, they've changed their approach a little bit in their informed consent models, and that we're talking about masturbation now. We're talking about, okay, that's an area of the body that's got very dysphoric for you, but you know what? It's all a penis is just a large clitoris. I mean, it's all the same material. It really is. So use it for the pleasurable purposes, partially that it was intended, and we'll see what happens. But these are to be answered questions. So can we avoid puberty and get good adult results? And secondly, how do we assure someone that they're going to be able to be sexually responsive? Do we remove the blockers during the course of their adolescence and let a little bit of puberty come back? Do we delay it a little bit, maybe into Tanner's 3 or 4, maybe before they have their first orgasms? Maybe.
He's spitballing. What do we do? Do we let a little puberty happen? Do we take them off later on? Do we start the blockers later? They don't know what they're doing, but they're doing this to tens of thousands of children. These boys will never have an orgasm as an adult. They're sterilizing kids. Puberty blockers combined with the opposite sex's hormones are sterilizing children. Now, I had another video right after this, but the sound is really poor quality. So I'll just tell you, I have a video of Kellen Lackhart. This is a woman who now says she's a man. The psychiatrist at Kaiser Permanente, which is a huge they have medical clinics all across the country in the US. And Kellen admits that they have cut off the breasts of girls as young as 12 years old, castrated 16-year-old boys. What they do is they actually slice open the penis and invert it to form what's called a neovagina. But because these kids were on puberty blockers, their penis never grew. So they don't have enough tissue to do this surgery. So what do? They cut out some of the boy's colon. Or they cut out some of his stomach lining, the peritoneum, to form the interior lining of this neovagina. They are doing this to children. Here in Canada, the National Post just reported about a month ago, we know they're cutting off the breasts of 14-year-old girls in Canada. Again, this is a social contagion primarily affecting girls. Let's go to the next slide, please. Who are these kids? Who are the kids who show up to these gender clinics? Well, about half of them are children with autism. The Tavistock is the biggest gender clinic in the world. It's being shut down now in the UK. But out of a sample of 1,069 children, 35% had moderate to severe autism, never mind the mild cases. These are kids who've suffered trauma, they've suffered abuse, they have terrible home lives. They're in state care. These are girls and boys who've suffered sexual abuse. Guess what? A little girl who's been sexually abused for years probably isn't loving being a girl right now. And if you give her an option where she can opt out of her sex to escape what for her is the greatest source of all this terrible oppression in her life, of course some of these girls are going to jump at the opportunity. They're trying to escape abuse. And we call this love and progress. Next slide, please. The number one thing you'll hear when you talk about this from these trans activists is if we don't cut up and sterilize these kids, they're gonna kill themselves. Really? We're told we have to affirm or else they will commit suicide. If a girl is anorexic and she wants to kill herself, do we affirm her anorexia? Do we say, yes, sweetheart, you're overweight, let's give you some liposuction? Of course not. Do we do this for any other mental health condition? Of course not. And guess what? Suicides don't go up if you don't transition kids, obviously. This is a lie. It's a despicable lie used to coerce parents to go along with this. They're told you can have a dead daughter or a live son, and it's used to silence people anytime they object to this. Well, whether you believe in creation or evolution, I've got news for you. People weren't killing themselves because they were going through puberty. If you believe in God, this ideology teaches that God made us wrong. If you believe in evolution, this ideology teaches that somehow 1 billion years of the process of natural selection has failed. And for the first time in history, we need a pharmaceutical company to help our children be their true selves. Totally insane. So it's all a lie. The other thing you hear is that puberty blockers are reversible. How is time reversible? If a girl goes on puberty blockers from 11 to 16, her breasts don't grow, her hips don't get wider, she loses bone density. Well, guess what? Those years of development are gone. She's not going to start going through puberty in her late teens and into her 20s. These boys end up with a micropenis for life. It's not reversible. This is a sales pitch where they say, we're just buying the children time for them to explore their magical gender identity. And sure, if you go on puberty blockers for 3 months, come off, not too much harm done. Puberty would resume. But we know in practice that 98% of the children who start on puberty blockers go on to the opposite sex's hormones. So now you got girls growing beards, getting a deep voice. After 4 or 5 years on testosterone, they have to get a hysterectomy because it causes vaginal and uterine atrophy. We're sending teenage girls into menopause, which has 100 side effects of its own. Early onset dementia, early onset osteoporosis. I don't need to tell a lot of the women in the audience what menopause is like. Now 15-year-olds are going through it. Next slide, please. So what do we do? I learned all about this, and I'm a dad of 2 girls. They're 11 and 13 years old now. When I first started learning about this, they were 7 and 9, 8 and 10 when I started this campaign. And the more you learn about this, the worse it gets. I've barely scratched the surface. But I decided I wasn't gonna look back at my life in 40 years and say I knew about the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history and did nothing about it. So what happened in July of 2020, a woman in the UK put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station that said, I love J.K. Rowling. Because J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author, has been the most well-known person in the world to speak out against this abuse and to stand up for women's rights. The sign that was put up at the Edinburgh train station lasted 1 day because some people on Twitter complained, and so the government-run train authority took it down. I got tired of our freedom of speech coming under attack, so I said, forget this. I'm all done being quiet, and I put up a billboard in Vancouver that said the same thing. It lasted 1 day because a Vancouver politician said it was hate speech. It's got a big red heart on it. Next slide, please. You can hit play. It doesn't matter. They covered it up the next day. I got paint bombed overnight, of course. They covered it up. I was prepared for this, and so I leveraged all the outrage online because this made some world news. And I leveraged the outrage into a quick little fundraising campaign, and a week later I had the same billboard up in San Francisco. Yep. Then I had one up in Portland, Los Angeles, all throughout Utah, all throughout the Washington, D.C. metro, in the underground, and then Times Square. That was my September of 2020, and I ran out of money, and no sign companies would work with me in Canada, and I had a vision to start conversations, because I believe we need to talk to people face to face. The only way we put a stop to this is through mass awareness campaign, and I'm a guy with no platform. I used to be a financial advisor, so I've taken the traditional career arc from financial advisor to sandwich board guy standing out on the street. But that's what I did. I had some signs made up. And I go outside, and I stand very quietly, and I have this sign on my front: children cannot consent to puberty blockers. And I normally have this sign on my back, which is my very technical definition of a dad, a human male who protects his kids from gender ideology. And I just talk to people, and it's wild when you go outside and start talking to people about this, because, you know, a lot of people don't want me to do that. Most people do want me to do it. I get a ton of support, but there's always going to be that 5% of society who want to stop you, and they'll do it by any means possible. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, we can go to the next slide. There's a whole bunch of swearing, so I don't want to get into that. But I got attacked one day in Montreal. I blocked a traffic cone that guy was swinging at my face with my forearm 4 times, so it broke it. Next slide. But here's the thing, they did me a favor. And I want to thank Antifa very much for helping to reach millions of people about this child abuse. Because when things like that happen out on the street, we can go to the next one, all it does is elevate our message and help us to reach more people. And so that's me in the hospital in Montreal as I was waiting for my taxi, which never came. And that was a surreal day, because I ended up walking back 1.5 miles in a snowstorm in a ghost town of Montreal, because it was during COVID. And they had a curfew of 8 p.m. I don't know if you realize this, but COVID really starts to spread at 8 o'clock. And you've got to get inside where it spreads even faster. But next slide, please. We cannot let these angry people stop us. We cannot let them intimidate us. We cannot be afraid to stand up for our kids. So we just keep going. That's me at Queen's University the next day. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Kids matter! Kids matter! Kids matter!
Okay. That's about 200 university students mobbing me in Ottawa, Canada. 2 people came out with me that day. I was actually there on my own in the morning, and then I went back in the afternoon. And CBC came out, CTV came out, my best friends. They interviewed me for 18 minutes and 15 minutes each, respectively. This was the #1 item on the news at night. And guess how much of my interview they aired? 0. Because they're only looking for something hateful to come out of my mouth. And as I think I hope all of you can tell this is not about hate. So you give them nothing. So they just run with the lies. But our country is being harmed dramatically by lying media and cowardly politicians. So what do? We just do something. I'm nobody. I'm a guy from the suburbs of Vancouver, BC, who realized that none of this is going to change unless we take this into our own hands. We can't rely on some prime minister to solve all our problems for us. We've got to fix this ourselves. I'm going to power through a few slides here quickly. You can go to the next one. Good news. Thanks to all the massive awareness that's being created around the world by several people fighting this, Finland, their medical body conducted a systematic review of all the evidence, and they found there was no evidence for transitioning kids. It's not helping them psychologically. Next slide. Sweden followed suit, same thing. They put a stop to this there. Next slide. And the next one. England, same thing. The National Health Service conducted a systematic review of all the evidence, and they have put a stop to this. No more children in England will receive puberty blockers. There's never been a proper clinical trial into this. It's all just a wild experiment on kids, except it's not even an experiment because there are no rules to follow. There are no randomized control trials. It's just child abuse based on a sick ideology that teaches that our children are born wrong just because maybe they don't conform to stereotypes. Historically, if you look at the kids with gender dysphoria, before they gave kids puberty blockers, so the most recent study before they started doing this madness was 2004, and it followed 139 boys with gender dysphoria from a young age, 5 years old, all the way into their 20s. 87.8% of these boys saw their gender dysphoria desist. It just went away. They grew out of it when they went through puberty. And a majority actually grew up to be gay. So, the LGB, we should never say LGBTQ. There's no such thing as an LGBTQ community, okay? These letters have paralyzed mankind. LGB is attraction. Transgenderism is a denial of reality itself. Queer theory is about destroying the nuclear family and making everything that's perverse and deviant in society normalized. They want to normalize pedophilia. They say it's a sexual orientation, that it's innate, that they're just minor attracted persons, and that it's only a problem if they act on their pedophilia, and that we shouldn't stigmatize these poor guys. Please, give me a break. But anyway, there's no such thing as a 2S LGBTQIA+++ community. Those are just a bunch of letters. Letters designed to silence you, because someone will call you a bigot for saying children shouldn't be sterilized. Well, we have to stop being afraid to tell the truth. Next slide, please. This is Jamie Reed. She's a whistleblower from the Washington University Transgender Clinic in St. Louis, Missouri. She describes herself as a queer woman, married to a trans man, politically left of Bernie Sanders, which I didn't even know was possible. But she came out earlier this year and blew the whistle on all this, and I felt like I was reading my own writing, because she confirmed everything I've been telling you today. There are no safeguards for these children. They're getting puberty blockers on their first appointments. They're sending them to therapists who will rubber stamp a letter for surgery. And if the therapist doesn't sign a letter for surgery, they'll send them to someone in-house who will do it. In Missouri last year at a Pride fair, a psychologist had a table set up with a sandwich board set up saying, trans or non-binary, free letters of recommendation for surgery. You could just walk up to the booth at the Pride Fair and get your letter for surgery. That's the level of safeguarding. WPATH, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, have gotten rid of all age requirements. There's no bottom limit to this anymore. When I was in Toronto having a protest outside of school a couple years ago, some of the crazy moms, put up these signs on all the telephone poles saying, don't police a body that doesn't belong to you. We trust children to know what's best for them. This is the trend among the far left, that children have agency over all these decisions in their life. So we've just got to get loud, and we got to stop it, and we need our politicians to stop being afraid, because this is a winning issue. You'll never lose a conservative vote. You're only going to pick up centrists and moderates all day long. I've had more than 20,000 conversations on the street, more than anyone in the world. More than 90% of the population supports me. Liberals, Democrats, a lot of NDP switched parties and voted PPC just for this one issue alone. These politicians just need to learn how to message on this. Speak about it with compassion. Don't be bombastic. Just tell the truth. This is child abuse, pure and simple, and there's no such thing as a transgender child. Next slide. We're winning. So I showed you that video a minute ago with those 200 university students mobbing me. It was just me, and there was a young woman there with me. I went back to the same street this year, not with one person, but with 500. A month later, there were 30,000 people across Canada. Immigrant communities. They're not down with this. None of them. Black community, not down with this. Hispanics, not down with this. But I'm gonna finish this off, and I'm sorry I went over time, but this last video is very important. This sums it all up. This is a video of a woman named Prisha Mosley. I found this on the website Reddit about 1.5 years ago. I think she probably expected 30 or 40 people to see it, but it was so powerful I tweeted it out, and it's been seen millions of times. And I was hoping she wouldn't get mad at me for doing that, and she didn't. And she's a true hero who has been testifying across the United States in state legislatures, where just in the past year alone, 20 different states have put a stop to this child abuse. So it was always gonna happen there first, and it's gonna spread across the border here. But let's listen to Prisha's testimony.
I can't believe this happened. I ruined my life. When you break it down, I decided that I didn't want to be a woman before I had ever even experienced being a woman. I had no idea what being a woman was like because I was a child. And now I feel like I will never entirely know. I want to say that I really feel like some people in the trans community and the trans medicalists and the doctors really, really target the most vulnerable of us. I have borderline personality disorder, and I know for a fact that this is the reason for my transition. It's a very difficult mental illness, and one of the core features is not having any sense of self or identity. And my doctors knew this. I told them, even though they didn't ask, that I had been diagnosed with BPD. And it was all fine to them. I wasn't happy as a girl, so that meant I was a boy and I was trans. And so I just took the cure that was handed to me. I was told that I was being given a cure, and I wouldn't want to kill myself anymore. And it wasn't true. I didn't want to cry in this video, but this is such a hard thing to talk about. I lost a lot of things to this, and I just hope that anyone else who's going through what I went through as a young girl will not be prescribed hormones and surgery because of other things. You know, there are so many mental health disorders that make you hate your body, and the solution isn't to change your body, it's to fix your brain, you know? I just don't want anyone else to ever feel this way. I lost my voice, I lost my chest. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have kids. I feel like no one wants to date me or love me because I'm ruined.
This is child abuse, and it's up to us to stop it. And we're going to stop it. I want to thank Rebel Media for 3 years for helping to boost my message. I need everyone's help. You can follow me on Twitter, which is where I do all my campaigning, at Billboard Chris. You can go to my website, billboardchris.com, and support me through there if you want. But what I really need people to do is to get educated about this and start having conversations, because this is not a fringe issue. This is affecting thousands and thousands of Canadian children. And we will look back at this in 10 years' time, like we look at lobotomies from the 50s. This is a scandal of unprecedented proportions, and we cannot tolerate it a moment longer. So thank you so much for all your support.